Hello, I'm Scott Wipperman, the pastor here at First Presbyterian Church. And no matter who you are or where you are in your journey of faith, know that you're welcome here. We hope you enjoy today's service on this video, and we invite you to come join us for worship anytime that you would like, or join us in any of the other activities of the church. For more information about First Presbyterian Church, please visit our website at fpchelena.com or call us at 442-4775. God bless.
And our gospel reading today comes from the Gospel of Mark. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all that they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." So they went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When Jesus landed and he saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. When they had crossed over, they landed at Gennesaret and anchored there. As soon as they got out of the boat, people recognized Jesus. They ran throughout the whole region and carried the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. And wherever he went, into villages, into towns or countryside, they placed the sick in the marketplaces. They begged him to let them touch even the edge of his cloak. And all who touched were healed. The word of the Lord. Well, in our first reading, David wants to build God a house. David, the roaming warrior who has now been victorious and now rests securely in the land that he's in, who has been declared king over all of Israel, who has declared that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel and has moved the Ark of the Covenant to a tent in Jerusalem. He's now sitting securely in his own home and saying, shouldn't God have a house as nice as mine? So he calls in Nathan, a prophet, and he asks him about this, and Nathan agrees with him and thinks it would be a good idea. But that night, God speaks not to David, but to Nathan, and tells him, over this whole time that I've had leaders of Israel who have shepherded my sheep, have I ever asked one of them, have I ever told one of them, why haven't you built me a house? The short answer to David's question about should I build God a house turns out to be no. God says that I have been with my people, I have moved with my people from the beginning. Why do I need a house? You shall not build me a house, but I will build you, David, a house. But the house that he's talking about building, David, the one that will be everlasting, the one that will go on, is Jesus Christ himself, who will come from David's line and be the house in which David can rest. Be the house in which all of us can rest. And then we get to this New Testament reading. The lectionary this week went to great pains to take two pieces of Scripture that are apart from one another. The first part deals with just after Jesus has sent out the 12, two by two, to go around and teach and to heal. And they all have come back, and they're telling Jesus what has happened while they were out, what wonderful things occurred, all the healing that they've been able to do, all the teaching they did. And it says that so many people were coming and going that they didn't even have time to eat. Now, I suspect that preparing food back then was a little more difficult and a little more time-consuming than going and picking up some fast food or popping that frozen TV dinner into the microwave today. You actually had to build a fire. You actually had to cook something. And they were so busy they hadn't had time to eat. And Jesus could see the overload, could see the stress on the disciples. So he says, let's go off to a quiet place. Let's go off to a desolate place where we're away from people. And so the story goes that they got into a boat and they went sailing from the northwest side of the Sea of Galilee over to the east side of the Sea of Galilee. But the text also says that the people saw where they were going and ran ahead of them and got there before they did. Now, I don't know if they were sailing into the wind and it was taking them a little bit longer because they had to keep tacking back and forth, or if old sailboats just weren't nearly as efficient as modern sailboats and they didn't go very fast. But whatever it was, people got there before they landed. And when Jesus lands, there were a multitude of people there. And Jesus says that he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And so, out of his compassion, he taught them. Now, what the text skips over here is that the next story is the story of the feeding of the 5,000. And after the feeding of the 5,000 is the story of him walking on the water. Lectionary skips over that and then picks up after Jesus has gotten back in the boat. And now they sail from the east side of the lake, of the Sea of Galilee, over to the west side, to that place I can hardly pronounce, Gennesaret, however you pronounce this, right? Which is not a town. They say it's just a fertile field that's 1 mile wide by 3 miles long. There's no evidence of a town ever having been there in Jesus' time. So he sails to some place where there aren't people for his disciples to get a rest. And guess what shows up? People. All right. They say that wherever he goes in this valley, people show up bringing in the sick and asking if they can just touch the edge of his cloak, and all those people are healed. So here Jesus comes and has compassion on those that he sees, and he heals them, makes them whole. So the disciples are trying to get some rest, but in both these situations, the only rest they got was while they were in the boat, with maybe some gentle lapping of waves against the boat as they were sailing. They had some quiet time, some peaceful time there along with Jesus. But whenever they land, people show up. And there isn't a chance for them to get a rest. Sometimes we're a little bit overloaded, right? Sometimes we need a rest. Sometimes we need Jesus to say, hey, come along, let's go off to a desolate place and rest a little bit. Well, the bad news is that we live in Helena, Montana. And Helena, Montana is in the top quartile of the most densely populated places. The good news is that it's in the top quartile of most densely populated places in the state of Montana. The state where we have 6.8 people per square mile. The state, or the city, which in our city limits is a national forest. The good news is that it isn't too hard to get to a desolate place around here. You don't have to go far to get away from people. You don't have to go far to get away from cell phone range, and you could be out of range for that. So if we want to pick up and get away from people, we can do it pretty easily here, more easily than in many places in our country. We can go out for a walk and be by ourselves. We can get out amongst God's beauty, amongst God's creation, see the wonders and the glories. Of course, if you went to Symphony Under the Stars last night, Helena didn't seem like a very desolate place, did it? There were a lot of people there. But sometimes when we go off to be by ourselves, we might actually come across somebody else. We might have come across some people who are in need of compassion. Like our readings today, Jesus, when he met the people before the feeding of the 5,000, had compassion on them and taught them. And when he got over to the west side of the lake again, he saw the people and had compassion and healed them. And then at the reading from Ephesians, Paul is talking about what Christ did, seeing that there were two people separated from each other, that the law of the land, the law of the circumcised, said, "Thou shalt not deal with the uncircumcised. Thou shalt not teach, thou shalt not talk with them, thou shalt not eat with them." But that Christ had compassion and tore down that barrier, tore down that wall that separated those two people and brought them all together as one person, as one people, out of compassion. So even when Jesus was seeking solace, when seeking time alone to rest, whenever he came across people who were in need, he had compassion. And even when we say we're tired and we need some rest, sometimes in the middle of our seeking rest, we find some people who have a need. And following Jesus' lead, we should be compassionate. We should be compassionate for them and for their need and help and teach or heal or whatever we can do for that need. Because what these texts tell us is that God isn't stowed away somewhere in a house, sitting there all by himself. God is always moving amongst his people. Whether it be God in the Ark of the Covenant, or whether it be God incarnate, Jesus Christ. I mean, just look at the story of Jesus Christ. What happens? He gets born in Bethlehem, and immediately the family is off to Egypt, seeking sanctuary. And then they come back to Nazareth. And he grows up for a while in Nazareth, but then he goes down to the Jordan River and gets baptized, and then he's off in the wilderness, and then he's back in preaching, and then he goes to his hometown, and they don't like him too much, and then he goes and he preaches elsewhere, and now here he is sailing back and forth across the Sea of Galilee, speaking to people on both sides. Jesus is always on the move. God is always on the move with us, to be with God's people. And so whenever you need some rest, sure, maybe you can try to find it. Maybe you can find a place that's alone and quiet and recharge a bit. Set aside the worries of the world. But know that no matter where you go, Jesus and God are going there with you. And whatever your needs are, they are compassionate. And they are addressing your needs. They are bringing about your restoration. They are bringing about your health, your well-being. Rest into their arms and accept it. And then be ready to go do likewise to anybody else you run across.